The rain lashed against the glass windows of St. Providence Medical Center as resident Emma Hawthorne entered the hospital that morning. The gray building, with its straight lines and narrow windows, seemed even colder under the overcast sky. Inside, the smell of antiseptic, the murmur of hurried footsteps, and the constant beep of heart monitor created an atmosphere she knew all too well. Emma was only 30, but her eyes already held the determination of someone who had fought for every inch of her journey. Tall, with her brown hair pulled back in a hurried bun and a firm gaze, she walked to the locker room with the same silent posture she always adopted, a posture that, for many there, was mistaken for insecurity or weakness. In the hallways, however, her name echoed in an unfriendly way. Some colleagues whispered that she lacked sufficient experience, that she was there only by luck, that she was too ambitious for her own good. The chief surgeon, Dr. Leonard Price, was the harshest of them all. A man in his 50s with an austere face, thick eyebrows, and an arrogance that hung in the air even before his presence was noticed. He would never miss an opportunity to remind her that, in his view, she was still too green for such great responsibilities. And in that hospital, Price's word carried the weight of a sentence. Emma knew of his reputation and never responded to any provocation. She carried within her what many didn't: years of obsessive study, nights spent deep into the early hours of the morning studying anatomy books, practice in advanced simulations, and a personal trauma that still haunted her. Her father had died in a small hospital in Tulsa when she was a teenager. A delayed surgery, a wrong choice, and his life was extinguished without a chance of return. That day, Emma vowed to do everything in her power to become someone capable of saving lives that others couldn't. This promise drove her every step, but no one at the hospital knew this, and she didn't care to reveal it either. When he entered the operating room that morning, he found the team debating a complex case. A 43-year-old patient, Daniel Rhodes, a well-known businessman, had been admitted after a car accident that had left his abdomen severely compromised. He had an unusual liver rupture, involving vessels that not everyone there had encountered. The bleeding persisted. Despite initial attempts at stabilization, the medical records showed that he had lost a lot of blood in a short time. Time was a cruel enemy. Dr. Price paced back and forth, giving quick instruction, but his expression carried more frustration than confidence. This was a case that demanded precise technique, unwavering calm, and an instant reading of the situation. He glanced at Emma as she approached, and his disdain was immediate. "Hawthorne," he said, adjusting the surgical mask around his neck, "this case is far beyond your level of expertise. Observe and learn. That's all." Those around looked away, some out of pity, others out of fear of getting involved. Emma simply swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and nodded. It wasn't worth confronting him. Not yet. The surgery began with Price in charge. The first attempts to control the bleeding failed, and gradually the tension in the room became almost palpable. The anesthesiologist checked the monitors anxiously. The nurses exchanged quick glances, and even the older residents seemed unable to hide their concern. Emma observed everything, analyzing every detail, seeing what Price was ignoring. He was skilled, but the technique he insisted on using wouldn't work on that rare type of injury. She knew it. She had studied exactly that type of case in little-known research, experimental models, and almost forgotten medical articles. The necessary approach was unusual, radical, risky, and very little known. When Price tried the traditional approach again, the bleeding worsened. The patient began to experience a sudden drop in blood pressure. Alarms sounded loudly. "Compression! Now!" Price shouted. But that wouldn't solve the problem. Emma felt her body move even before she could rationalize it. She approached the operating table and spoke, her voice firm, without trembling. "Doctor, the approach isn't working. The rupture is progressing through the segmental vessels. You need to." "I know what I'm doing," he retorted, raising his voice. "Step aside, resident." His tone cut through the air like a blade. The nurse beside her took a step back. The anesthesiologist pursed his lips. Emma, for a moment, felt the weight of humiliation once more falling upon her. But she didn't back down. Not this time. Her heart pounded, but her eyes didn't waver. "If this continues, he won't last another 10 minutes, she said, with surgical precision in every word. "The hemorrhage isn't in the area you're trying to repair. It's a rare type of bilibar rupture. We have to control segmental irrigation before the main approach. There's an alternative protocol that few people use. I studied this case." Dr. Price flashed a cynical smile behind his mask. "Oh, sure. And am I supposed to believe that a rookie resident knows a technique that I don't?" Silence. The entire room fell still. Emma felt the weight of the moment. If she failed, she would never have another chance. If she backed down, she would never be able to forgive herself. "I'm not asking you to believe me," she replied, stepping forward. "I'm asking you to look at the sign. He's going to die if he continues like this." The monitor beeped again, indicating an even more intense drop in pressure. The anesthesiologist made a desperate expression. "Doctor, we're losing him." Dr. Price hesitated for the first time. And it was in that pause, that tiny second, that Emma realized there was an opening. She approached the operating field with unexpected confidence and began to describe, with striking clarity, the procedure that was to be performed. "We need to temporarily occlude the right and left segmental branches to reduce the flow. Then we perform a retrograde suture and control the main suture. It's the only way to stabilize it without it going into total failure." The entire room held its breath. Dr. Price narrowed his eyes, irritated, proud, but also frightened. It was clear he didn't know what to do, and he knew everyone there had noticed. "Do you think you can save this patient, Hawthorne?" he asked in a challenging tone. "No, I'm sure," she said. For long seconds, the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the monitor racing against time. Dr. Price finally put down the instruments, took a step back, and tossed the surgical towel onto the metal tray. "Then do it," he murmured, almost inaudibly. "But if you fail, your entire future is at stake." Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. She approached the table, took a deep breath, and immersed herself in the surgery as if she were the only person in the room. Her hands were steady, her movements precise, her mind a complete map of the anatomy before her. She began occluding the vessels with methodical calm, exactly as she had learned from experimental models. She controlled the blood flow with such skill that even the nurse trembled at the mastery she demonstrated. The anesthesiologist saw the pressure stabilize, and his eyes widened. The residents in the background exchanged glances of pure astonishment. The technique was risky, complex, almost counterintuitive, but Emma executed it as if she had done it dozens of times. When she finally reached the critical point of the rupture, she performed the retrograde suture with delicacy and perfect surgical speed. Every knot, every cut, every movement was flawless. She seemed not to breathe while she worked, completely immersed in absolute creation. 15 minutes later, the bleeding had stopped, the pressure had stabilized, the monitor had stopped screaming danger, and the entire room was silent, but not a silence of tension. It was the silence of disbelief. Emma slowly stepped back, allowing air to return to her lungs. She looked at the patient, then at the team. They all stared at her as if they were facing something impossible. Dr. Price, visibly shaken, approached with heavy steps. For a moment, Emma thought he was going to yell, complain, try to downplay what she had done. But for the first time since she had arrived at the hospital, the arrogance had vanished. "Hawthorne," he began, wiping his forehead. "How did you know that?" She calmly wiped off her gloves, her gaze steady yet serene. "I studied rare cases during my research fellowship before coming here," he replied. "I spent months analyzing bilibar rupture models in extreme situations. I never imagined I would see a real case so soon." Dr. Price took a deep breath, as if absorbing a truth that was difficult to accept. "You ... saved his life," he said, his voice choked with wounded pride. "None of us could have done it." Emma simply nodded. There was no arrogance in her posture, only the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done their duty. The patient was transferred to the ICU, still critical, but with a real chance of survival. When the team left the room, several professionals approached Emma. Some patted her on the shoulder, others smiled, others simply murmured "good job." But all of them, absolutely all of them, looked at her with a new kind of respect, the kind that cannot be asked for, only earned. Hours later, as Emma walked down the hallway toward the cafeteria, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. It was Dr. Price. He stopped in front of her, took a deep breath, and with visible effort, spoke. "I was wrong about you." Emma didn't answer. She just kept her gaze fixed. "From today onwards," he continued, "I want you by my side in all the advanced cases that come my way. I think I have a lot to learn from you, Hawthorne." Emma felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. It wasn't vanity, it wasn't pride, it was the feeling that the promise she had made to her younger self years ago was finally being honored. "Thank you, doctor," she said calmly. "I just want to save lives. Nothing more." He nodded, almost smiling, and walked away. Emma walked down the corridor, feeling the weight of the day lift from her shoulders. The hospital still echoed with sounds of urgency, hurried footsteps, and requests on the intercom. But something had changed. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She was no longer the silent resident that many underestimated. She was the surgeon who had done the impossible, the one who had saved the patient that no one else could save. And that night, as she left the hospital and felt the cold air touch her face, Emma Hawthorne finally allowed herself to smile. Because she knew that, from that day forward, her story as a surgeon in the United States was only beginning, and no one would ever dare call her inexperienced. Again, that night at St. Providence Medical Center continued to unfold like a silent battlefield, where every second seemed to carry the weight of decisions capable of turning destinies upside down. Caroline remained by the patient's side for long minutes after stabilizing, watching the heart monitor with attentive eyes, silently measuring every variation, every small fluctuation that could betray him about to fall back into the abyss from which she had just dragged him back. The entire room was still permeated with the tension that precedes calamity, the same tension that hangs in the air when a life hangs by a thread, fragile, vulnerable, almost transparent. The professionals present still couldn't comprehend what they had just witnessed. Its short-haired nurse, who had been one of the first to underestimate Caroline that night, remained leaning against the wall, her eyes fixed on her with a mixture of disbelief and guilt. The anesthesiologist, an older man, breathed slowly, as if each breath were an attempt to reorganize the mental pieces that had been knocked over when the surgery went wrong and Caroline took control. It was impossible to ignore what she had done, and no matter how much they tried to rationalize it, an uncomfortable truth insisted on emerging. They had made a mistake. She had saved the patient because of a preparation that no one there had had the humility to investigate. The heart monitor beeped twice, softly, indicating continued improvement. Caroline ran a hand over her face, feeling the accumulated heat from the intense effort, but also something deeper, a kind of powerful serenity, the inner certainty that she hadn't hesitated, that she had remained firm when everything around her seemed about to crumble. She wasn't seeking recognition. She wasn't the type of person who acted expecting applause, but it was impossible to deny the impact of that moment on her soul. For the first time in a long time, she felt that the voice that had been silenced so many times had finally found a place where it could no longer be. A familiar footstep echoed down the hallway, and everyone in the room turned almost simultaneously. Chief Surgeon Dr. Howard Keaton appeared in the doorway, his face still marked by the incredulous expression he had carried since the moment he learned of the upheaval that had occurred inside. He had spent his entire career carrying the reputation of a rigorous, perfectionist man, known for praising little and criticizing with surgical precision. He approached slowly, looking at each member of the team, but his eyes stopped on Caroline. It was as if everything that needed to be said was trapped deep inside, and he struggled to find the right way to let it out. Caroline stood firm, though she could feel her heart racing just a little, not from fear, but from uncertainty about what was to come. She had faced many things in life, from professors who said she didn't have enough discipline for medicine to bosses who saw her as someone who needed to prove herself twice as much to be considered half, but none of those experiences came close to what it meant to stand before Dr. Keaton that night. He took a deep breath before speaking. but his words came out softer than anyone would have expected. They weren't soft because they were delicate, but because they carried the weight of someone who needed to acknowledge an undeniable truth. They gave the full account, he said, every single detail. And they reviewed the video from the room. There's no doubt about what you did. The silence that followed seemed palpable. The short-haired nurse swallowed hard, as if she still couldn't believe what she was about to hear. The anesthesiologist, who had remained quiet until then, straightened his posture, perhaps in a mixture of respect and expectation. The other two residents, who had contributed little during the crisis, now seemed to want to disappear into thin air. So ashamed were they. Doctor, Keaton continued, I saw you enter this room. I saw your face when they called me. I thought... He hesitated for the first time. I thought you were going to be a hindrance, because that's what I expected when I heard who sent you. I thought you were inexperienced, that you weren't capable of taking on greater responsibilities. I was unfair. Caroline felt a slight tightness in her chest. She had always known he didn't believe, but hearing it from him was different, heavier, more real, more definitive. But today, he continued, you proved that you know exactly what you're doing. And not only that, you saved the patient's life when we all failed. I'm not going to try to justify my action. I'll simply say that I was wrong. No sound was made by anyone. It was as if the hospital had stopped for a few seconds. I want you on my advance, he said finally, starting today. The nurse let out a small sigh of surprise. The anesthesiologist's eyes widened. One of the residents murmured, oh my God, so low it was almost lost in the air. The advanced team was the most prestigious team in the hospital, composed of the most experienced surgeons, the best professionals in the institution. It was where the impossible cases happened. It was the heart of the hospital. And never, in its entire history, had someone who was still seen as an intern by so many been invited in that way. Caroline didn't know what to say. For years, she had dreamed of being part of that team, but not like this. Not after a crisis, not after someone almost died. And at the same time, she felt that perhaps this was how true things happened, imperfectly, abruptly, when no one is ready. Dr. Keaton extended his hand. Accepted? Carolyn looked at his hand, at the sincere and deep eyes behind that hard expression, and finally replied, accepted. He nodded and turned to leave the room, but stopped before passing through the door, saying, it starts tomorrow, at 6 in the morning. The door closed behind him, and then the room, previously heavy with tension and fear, began to take on new contour. The nurse slowly approached Caroline, as if she were still gathering the courage to speak what she had kept inside. She took a deep breath. I'm so sorry. I treated you like you didn't know what you were doing, and you saved a life. You made me see how blind I was. Thank you for standing firm. Caroline gave a small smile without any sign of resentment. Everything's fine, he said. In times of crisis, we all react in the way I just did what needed to be done. The nurse smiled back, a shy but honest smile. It was the kind of moment that marked the beginning of a change, not just for Caroline, but for everyone in that room. Hours later, when dawn finally settled over the city and the hospital quieted down, Caroline walked outside to breathe in the cool, fresh air that seemed to cleanse her soul. The parking lot was silent, with only a few cars scattered under the dim light of the streetlights. The windows reflected the darkness of the night, and for a moment she felt small before the immensity of that world that always seemed to demand more than any human being could give. But, for the first time, she didn't feel inadequate. She didn't feel out of place. She didn't feel like someone who had to continually prove that she deserved to be there. That night, with all its challenge, had shown her a truth that perhaps she herself had forgotten. She belonged there. As she walked to her car, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw one of the residents, the youngest, with dark brown hair and a perpetually tense expression, approaching slowly. Caroline, he said, adjusting his glasses with some embarrassment. I wanted to thank you and apologize. I should have helped more. I froze. You didn't. You stood firm. I won't forget. She nodded gently. She didn't want anyone to carry guilt. They had been through something difficult, and everyone had learned something. Don't blame yourself. she said. Emergency situations are like that. You never know exactly how you're going to react until you're in the middle of them. He smiled shyly and remained silent for a few seconds before asking, "May I walk with you to the car?" Caroline agreed, and they walked side by side, each processing the events in their own way. He stopped before she got into the vehicle and said, "I know that nothing I say will change what happened, but I'm glad you were there today, truly." She thanked him and got into the car. As she started the engine, she watched the resident drive away, still carrying the weight of that night on his shoulders, and realized that perhaps something had changed within him as well. Perhaps she had planted a seed of humility, courage, and growth, just as someone had once planted one within her. The road was empty, and Caroline drove in silence, letting the darkness of dawn envelop the city. The moon, high and silvery, seemed to accompany her in the same way it had accompanied so many nights when she had studied until dawn, or worked exhausting shifts, or wondered if she was really on the right path. That night, however, something was different. For the first time, the moon seemed to bear witness. To witness a woman who had been doubted so many times finally finding her place, that the voice they had tried to silence so many times was finally heard, that the shadow of insecurity was finally beginning to dissipate. And on that silent journey, as the city lights faded into the distance, Caroline felt something inside her begin. It was about to flourish. It wasn't arrogance nor pride. It was simply the profound certainty, the kind that comes from the soul, that the path ahead was only just beginning.